Greetings one and all, and welcome to the Dark Rider movie analysis. I am the Nightmare Rider, Mage Mime, reminding you, as always, that even a cheeseburger can be deconstructed to its original source. Movie remakes are an annoying trend in film for the past decade or so, with most of them being very critically panned. There are, however, a few that I consider to be worthy of mention, such as the 1990 version of Night of the Living Dead and the 2006 version of The Hills Have Eyes. What these remakes have in common was that they largely respected the themes and concepts of the original, while still telling a different enough story to be their own film. The Clash of the Titan remake, however, does not. As such, I'll be bringing up a fair few comparisons with the original Clash of the Titans, but this is for the purpose of illustrating how the original works, while the remake does not. This is not to say that the remake is bad simply because it is different, rather that even as a standalone story, the Clash of the Titans remake fails in almost every respect. A key feature of Greek mythology is that the Greek pantheon are dicks. They are petty, jealous, and quite easily meddle in the affairs of man when they see fit. In some respects, they are a reflection of the aspects of humanity that we find dramatic and entertaining. Greek myths are, in many ways, considered the soap operas of their day. The original knew this, and portrayed Zeus and Thetis as frequently undermining each other's authority, creating a conflict for the protagonist to work against. Thetis even jokes about the well-known fact that Zeus can't keep his manhood in his pants, frequently transforming into other animals to seduce mortal women, which is how some of the more recognisable Greek heroes are conceived. The remake tries to use this fact that the Greek pantheon are fickle to justify the war setting, but this could have easily made an interesting take, but right out of the gate it completely fails. We are only told why the mortals are angry at the gods for their abuse, barely being shown one example of the supposed atrocities that they are being put through. We are constantly expected to just believe the world works the way they are explained to because the characters say so. If the gods are becoming weaker due to lack of prayers and worship, then why don't we get a comparison to show how their powers are weakening? How do we know that the plague and famine aren't the result of the gods' powers being weaker? So rather than understanding the mortals' plight, the mortals are so arrogant that there is no one to get emotionally invested in this film. Even worse, Zeus is completely oblivious to all the suffering he is causing. He comments on how arrogant the mortals are, yet he has so little knowledge of how his creation is supposed to survive. If he was giving the mortals a hard time, it would be because he was stupid, not an asshole. Zeus is so dumb that he is surprised to find out that Perseus is his son, considering that he literally posed the king of Argos to sleep with his wife. He literally does not know that, for humans, having sex is how babies are made. In the original, the gods punish individual sins accordingly. Calibos is turned into a satyr because he killed all but one of Zeus's winged horses. He is portrayed as clearly an antagonist, but still has some level of sympathy to him. Even his mother Thetis knows when his actions aren't justified. In the remake, Calibos was the king of Argos, but such a generic villain that, like Perseus himself, he's practically a blank slate, having almost no defining personality to him at all, not to mention how Hades is constantly speaking in an annoying raspy voice. Perseus speaks in whispers most of the time and has the same dull surprise expression for almost the entire movie. I don't see any characters here, just cookie cutter archetypes with no thought or consideration putting into making them stand out from one another. The story of the original had multiple conflicts. The first was Calibos, who forces the suitors of Andromeda to solve riddles if they are to marry her, being killed if they fail. It is only an offhand blasphemous comment from Queen Cassiopeia later in the film that causes Thetis to demand Andromeda be sacrificed to the Kraken. The remake uses this for the entire plot, leaving the story feeling gutted because of it. The film completely fails to deliver on its promised complex conflict, instead giving us a story so incredibly basic that it becomes insulting to my intelligence. Because of how constant the exposition is, it feels like it's written in a way that it doesn't expect us to be smart enough to understand what's happening through just being shown. No, it has to spell out for us every single motivation, thought and plot point so that we don't get lost. I went into this film expecting at least some epic action sequences, but even that is a complete failure. As I stated in my review for Godzilla 2014 and Pacific Rim, the CGI should be used sparingly, which is something that Jurassic Park got spot on and taught other filmmakers to do. However, in this movie, we are bombarded with so many CGI magical creatures and effects that the movie may as well be dangling shiny keys in front of our eyes to distract us from everything else. Zeus always has to teleport down to Earth in human form with a big flash of lightning, and Hades is always floating around in this thick black fog. Not to mention how the monsters themselves look like rubber, void of any real texture or weight to their movements, just floating around to make them look big, so the characters never feel like they are in any way hitting them during battle. These effects are easily surpassed by both Van Helsing, released in 2004 and generally seen as having bad effects, and Jurassic Park, that was one of the very first films to properly utilise this technology. There is no excuse to be this bad. As if that wasn't bad enough, the camera is constantly shaking, zooming in and cutting away during the battle scenes that we can hardly see what's going on. To the film's credit, the practical effects used for Calibos, the Djinns and the Stygian Witches do look nice and grotesque, which is one of the few overall improvements from the otherwise spectacular and quite frankly more convincing stop motion animation from the legendary Ray Harryhausen. The Stygian Witches themselves have much of the same bickering and menacing personality they did from the original, so even if they do suffer the same level of underacting as the rest of the cast, it gives their dialogue a level of mystique that is actually effective. Alas, this is where my praise for the movie ends. I've already talked about how the characters and the plot are dumbed down, but there are several crucial instances which completely broke the film for me. Pegasus just happens to fly down and find Perseus among the winged horses just because the gods say so, which completely removes any drama there may have been from the original, where Perseus actually has to go through a lot to find and tame Pegasus, even saving him from Calibos himself. The Medusa fight has no tension, because Medusa just slithers around with no aim or precision, trying to be creepy until Perseus finds out his shield is reflective completely by accident. But the absolute worst offender, beyond all the dumb gods, beyond all the horrifically slow pacing just to drag out this film to full running time, is the treatment of Andromeda. Andromeda in the original was in some points a damsel in distress. However, she still has far more character than she does in this remake. She admits that her previous love for Calibos was childish and misplaced, even actively guiding Perseus to the Stygian Witches. In the remake, she gets one or two lines about how what the king is doing is wrong about the gods, and there's a complete blank slate for the rest of the film. She isn't even Perseus' love interest, with that dishonour going to Io, who may as well be the exposition fairy, treating women as little more than plot devices with no defining character traits pisses me off with just how sexist it is. Fuck this movie. Overall, I hate the Clash of the Titans remake with a burning passion. It is a lazy cash grab, with terrible pacing that drags out an already oversimplified plot, inconsistent characters that are beyond stupid, terrible acting, two-dimensional villains, and horrific CGI. This is an insult to everything that Ray Harryhausen worked to create. What tiny saving graces this movie has prevents it from being a total failure, but still gets a final rank of D-. Until the next review, this is the Nightmare Rider, Major Mind, riding out.